Dear listener, before the story begins, I ask you to subscribe to my channel. This is the best motivation at the start. And we are starting. Greetings to all. I find myself in the early years of my 5th decade, and the weight of recent events has left me burdened with immense stress. In this moment, my faculties fail me in discerning the most judicious course of action. Thus, your counsel is of utmost value. The vicissitudes of fate have truly tested me in matters of the heart, and it is only through hearing the entirety of my tale that one may truly comprehend my plight. Twice have I entered into the bonds of matrimony. It strains credulity that such misfortune could befall me again, but let us proceed in a chronological manner. My inaugural union, born of a courtship spanning 4 years, endured for but 2. She, a mere score in age, and I, 23. We were blessed with a child of 2 years. Our nuptials were precipitated by the pregnancy, yet our love was true. She awaited my return while I served in the armed forces, our affection so profound that even a triduum apart was unbearable. The wedding and child were anticipated, albeit slightly premature, as we had intended to wait until the completion of my wife's studies. And thus, a wedding of such splendor as to be the stuff of dreams. Then, the arrival of our son. We made our home with my parents, and a perfect harmony reigned between my wife and kin, suffusing all with joy. I strove to be a responsible father and husband, exerting myself to earn every possible penny for my family's sake. Never did I seek aid from others, endeavoring to achieve all through my own efforts. And so began our quotidian existence. I labored nearly every day, attempting to devote attention to my loved ones. I abstained from fraternizing with friends, from drink, and consequently, from dalliances or affairs with other women. I am a man devoted to one woman, holding fast to my principles regarding the nature of family, of love, and so forth, unwavering throughout my life. I recognized that the cares of family had cooled the ardor of our feelings, but I regarded this as a transient state, believing that together we could weather these trials. Meanwhile, my wife took leave from her studies while our son was young, but after a year, she was compelled to return to her education. I tended to him in my spare moments, as did my parents. She too played the role of mother admirably. And here unfolds the tale of deceit and betrayal. My wife had harbored an affection from her school days, a childhood sweetheart. Not a love per se, but you understand my meaning. Then, after 6 months, he relocated to another city and they lost contact. Yet these feelings lingered in her memory. And so she sought him out on social media, and they conversed about this and that, recounting what had transpired in their lives since their parting. I perceived no danger in this correspondence, but as time passed, I observed that their exchange had persisted for a month and a half, and each morning and evening commenced with her missives to him. I am, to some degree, a man of great jealousy, sensitivity, and vulnerability. And so, I began to delve into the nature of their communication and perceived that my wife was erasing messages that implicated her. Then followed a calm dialogue with my wife, which gave way to a more impassioned one, yet never descending into physical altercation. She maintained her silence to the last, shedding tears, offering no explanation for 3 days. Amidst this quarrel, she repeatedly suggested divorce as a means to end our mutual torment. When I inquired about the nature of her relationship with him, she flew into a rage, refusing to clarify anything. At length, after prolonged outbursts and conjectures on my part, she made her confession to me, admitting that she had met with him on multiple occasions, that they had strolled in parks and frequented places of entertainment. My wife conceded that she had embraced him with fervent kisses, and that she felt a powerful attraction to him, yet she insisted that it would not have progressed to the point of physical intimacy, as she was cognizant of her obligations as a wife and mother. I suspect that matters could only have worsened, as the impetus for their encounters, their kisses, and any further developments stemmed solely from her. Simultaneously, this friend of hers was also married with a child. He had made attempts to curtail their relationship to avoid destroying our families. At that juncture, I had no thoughts of divorce. I then brought her and my son to her parents' home for approximately 3 days, believing that I would regain my composure and reassess the situation with a clear and dispassionate mind. However, those 3 days stretched into a week, and throughout that time, I was in anguish. Sleep eluded me at night, and I wept into my pillow. I was unable to work effectively, my thoughts consumed by her. You must understand, I was a young man then, and of course, the image of her walking with him, their kisses, and perhaps even more intimate acts, played incessantly before my mind's eye. Fortunately, my father, still alive and well at the time, came to my aid. He advised me that they had undoubtedly engaged in some form of infidelity, and that I should seek a divorce, as she would likely continue to be unfaithful throughout her life. I contemplated this course of action, and approached her to discuss it, to which she readily and unequivocally agreed. And to think, there had been such love between us. At the same time, she insisted that our son remain with her, which I initially refused, but there was no turning back. The young woman clung to her demands and refused to consider any alternative to divorce. She resorted to ultimatums and blackmail, and on the day of the court proceedings, I relented. We finalized our divorce. Initially, I saw my son for about a year, perhaps less, but that is beside the point. I was deeply distressed by the dissolution of our marriage, seeking solace in drink and in visits with my son. However, approximately a year later, maybe even less, but again, that is not the crux of the matter, that friend of hers, the paramour, also divorced his wife, naturally at her instigation, as she had discovered his infidelity. She gathered her belongings and returned to her parents. He then invited my former wife to cohabitate with him. They moved in together, and after 6 months they wed. A further 8 months later, his parents, who were working in Poland at the time, extended an offer to the newly married couple to join them there. They deliberated and accepted the proposal. It was at this point that my connection with my son was severed, reduced to infrequent telephone calls and communication on major holidays and his birthday. You understand the situation. He is being raised by another man, as his mother has endeavored to instill the worst impressions of me in the growing child. I am certain that she has even resorted to falsehoods. As time passed, I found the strength to cope, ceased drinking, and immersed myself in my work. It was then that I encountered my future wife, Emily, in a most romantic fashion. We began to date and eventually moved in together, renting an apartment where we resided for nearly a year. At that moment, an unforeseen event occurred with my employment. The company closed its doors, leaving me without my previous income, and we were forced to return to our parents' homes. Once I went to visit her, only to find that she was not at home. I waited, growing increasingly worried and wondering where she could be, as it was supposedly her day off. At last she arrived, accompanied by a certain specialist who worked with her in the same building. A dreadful scene of jealousy and interrogation ensued. You must understand, my past experiences had left an indelible mark on my psyche. Any situation, no matter how innocuous, I would exaggerate, magnify, and imagine the worst in terms of infidelity. In that moment, Emily seemed impetuous and somehow unlike herself to me. I felt uneasy, and we argued before I departed for home, burdened by a heavy sense of unease. After some time we reconciled, but the situation repeated itself. As I walked to her place, I spotted the same scoundrel driving in the same direction. My heart sank, and I ran, only to catch a glimpse of her riding off with him to the disco. Where else would they go after work but to the disco? And indeed, she had gone with him to the disco, where I found her. It was hardly surprising, as we were both young, around 25 years of age. Once more there were scenes of jealousy and all that entailed. Afterward, everything seemed to settle down for several months, but I was plagued by the question of whether she had been unfaithful to me. At times, I would press her on the issue and she would deny any infidelity, but I could find no peace. I was tormented. Sinfully, in a moment of drunken weakness, I myself was unfaithful to Emily with some singer. Yes, and foolishly I let something slip on May Day. There followed visits to the clinic for sexually transmitted diseases, treatment, and all that it entailed. She then suspected me, and I was compelled to confess everything to her. Believe me, I was deeply and sincerely remorseful for my actions. She was overcome with hysteria and tears, and it pained me to witness it all. I offered my most heartfelt apologies. Then, everything seemed to be well once more, but after 6 or 7 months, I happened to visit her workplace and saw her sitting beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. They noticed me and appeared alarmed. I was consumed with rage, believing that our relationship had come to an end. A week later, she called me, weeping and pleading with me to come to her. I went, and we clashed again amidst jealousy, interrogations, and questions about whether anything had transpired between them. Then, everything seemed to truly improve. We were dating, always together, and both she and I were happy. A year and a half later, we married. A year after that, a child was born, and everything was perfectly fine. Money began to flow, and we had, I would say, a strong family. 5 years later, we had another child, and were living in harmony as the children grew. Once we visited one of the local lakes and, would you believe it, we encountered that damnable specialist there, probably 14 years after the last incident. Once again, everything inside me boiled over, and I began to question Emily, even going so far as to harass her. I could find no peace, as memories of the past resurfaced. I could not calm myself, or if I did, it was only for a short while. I asked her again where they had gone and what they had done. She told me, but I sensed that there was no truth in her words. Then an idea occurred to me, and I suggested that she take a lie detector test. At first she agreed, but when I began to ask in earnest, she burst into bitter tears and confessed everything. That it had happened, even how many times, and that she deeply regretted and repented for it all. And of course, all of this occurred after my own transgression. I am to blame, of course, but I confessed immediately. Well, perhaps if they had not pressed me, I might not have admitted it, but that is another matter entirely. Outwardly, I received her confession calmly, but inside, my heart raced wildly, and so I find myself at a loss as to what I should do. Behind me lie 15 years of a happy life that I myself destroyed in an instant, and I am uncertain of what the future holds. Given the failure of my first marriage, I fear that I may never again be able to trust a woman or build a family. I try to forget, I want to forget, but I cannot. At times, I may forget for 3 days, but then jealousy seizes me with renewed intensity, its venom poisoning me from within. What am I to do? I simply loathe this situation. Some may find it amusing, others may condemn me harshly. But you must understand, we were young and all that it entails, but I am not indifferent. Perhaps someone among the more experienced can offer some advice.